Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
Shutting down the stuff. So before we, while you're doing that, Adele Spraggon, right?
Yes, it is. Rhymes with dragon.
That's a wonderful name. So Adele, from what she was telling me earlier, we're going to talk about the different neural links like NLP. Would you say, Adele?
No, it's my own proprietary technique. So it's not
Wonderful.
NLP. I have a different approach. So we can just go into what that is, but it's 4 steps and it's highly effective. So
then tell us a little about yourself, Adele, and what you do.
all right. So I'm a behavioral change expert. I've been in the field of behavioral change for over 35 years. Traditionally, before, I was following all the traditional approaches. So before I created this proprietary technique, I was very much following all the methodologies for behavior change, such as positive thinking and affirmations and visualizations and proper goal setting, and on and on and on and on I went. The problem was that I wasn't being very effective. Frankly, I had a pattern for quitting, and I kept quitting everything over and over again. And I also had very, very high anxiety, and I kept having panic attacks. And no amount of what I was following was supporting me in changing any of that. And so, I shouldn't say entirely. It would help a little bit, but not to the extent that I was looking for. So I took myself to university, and I decided, okay, maybe it's the way our brain is working that is different from how we're being taught how it's working. And sure enough, I discovered that we are all using what I call the wrong operating instructions. And as I learned how to repattern my own brain, and I saw how effective we can be as human beings once we know how to work with our brain the way it's designed, I thought, okay, this has to be taught. So that's what I've been teaching for the last 10 years. I teach a 4-step repatterning technique that changes the underlying brain patterns that give rise to a person's actions, behaviors, beliefs. And John, the results are remarkable. Like I went from before, when I worked with people, we would get about a 25% success rate. Now we get on average an 87% success rate. Like it's just night and day. So when we know how to use the brain effectively, it's remarkable what we can accomplish.
Oh, 100%. I agree. For me, I've been reading a lot of books because the March 2020 crash piqued my interest. I'm like, okay, why is everyone crying, emotions and happy? So it started this whole thing. And I realized to do trading, it's business. Business is mindset. And I found the book Thinking Fast and Slow. I want to say, is that a very similar approach to what you teach?
I haven't really read that book in its entirety. I have heard about it, like the subconscious makes those quick decisions, right? And then the conscious mind is the decision maker. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, John, is the latest findings coming out of neuroscience are frankly super surprising, very, very surprising. And people need to know how the brain is working so that they can use it effectively. And definitely decision-making is a massive part of what I teach, because we are taught that we can make decisions freely and openly and that we have choice. And the interesting thing about our brain is that because it creates patterns, because it creates neural pathways that make decisions on our behalf, we don't have that level of free will that we think we have.
Right.
And if we're going to make a brand new decision, we have to start by removing the old pattern that was giving rise to the old decision first. That's the key to how to work the brain. We need a method of removal, not addition.
Interesting. So I told her earlier before I hit the record button, I listened to some of her episodes with other podcasters. What are some of the tricks? Let's say someone really, really wants to start some big project. What, you're quitting one. How would you, with your 4 steps, approach that to help them?
Yeah. So the difference between what I teach and what a traditional approach teaches is primarily this. Let's say that you have that big project that you want to start, right? Okay. So that is a goal that you're setting in your mind. That's something that you want to achieve. The next step is not to ask yourself, how do I get there? The next step is to ask yourself, why am I not there today? Okay, now I'm going to pause and I'm going to let every person who is listening just think about that for yourself. Just set a goal, large, small, doesn't matter. Now, the next question is not how do I get there? The next question is why am I not there right now? What's stopping me? Right? You'll notice that your mind starts coming up with a whole bunch of excuses. So, well, I don't have the money. That might be one thing, right? Or I don't have the time. Or I'm so busy doing this, I just don't want to dedicate the energy over there. Or I'm not focused. Or I'm not good enough. Or I'm incapable. Right? And you'll notice all of these thoughts start to come up. Great. How I'd like you to think about your brain is think of it as an iceberg. At the top of the water are all of your actions, all of your behaviors, all of your beliefs. Below the water lies your brain patterns. Under everything that you're thinking right now that is saying, I don't know how to do that, or I'm incapable of doing that, there runs a brain pattern. And it is that pattern that is giving rise to that belief or that behavior or that action. Okay, everybody following so far? So what we need to do is instead of trying to fix that problem, is to go under the water and remove the pattern that is giving rise to that problem. As soon as that pattern's gone, your brain will do what your brain does brilliantly, and that is create a brand new pattern. And that brand new pattern is going to lead you in the direction of your goal. Okay? And we can get into why in a moment, but I'm going to just check in with Josh and make sure that this is understandable. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yes, very understandable.
Okay,
I love
awesome. Okay, so why is it that once you remove an old pattern that is taking an unworkable action, behavior, belief, that your brain will take you in the direction of that goal? Well, there's a few reasons why that is going to happen. The first thing you need to know is how your brain created patterns to begin with. So human being, unlike other animals, we are born a blank slate. A lot of animals are born instinctively knowing what to do. We do not. We have to learn everything. So we enter into this world, and very quickly, our brain has to make connections about what it's doing and whether that was effective or not. And as soon as it takes an action, it stores that action away for future use. And it says, okay, that's great. This action took me through from this situation to another situation. So it must be a good action. So I'm going to store it away so that next time I encounter a similar situation, I will know what to do. Everybody got that, right? So your brain's just rapidly piecing together these patterns and forming them in the brain. Now, when you were 5 years old, Josh, highly likely you weren't good enough for what you're trying to do today, right? Highly likely that the action that you took back then, probably not that effective. But the brain doesn't care. It just continues to try and use that action over and over again. And that's how we get stuck. If we're going to take a brand new action, we need to remove that one, like I was saying. So what happens when we remove it is our brain is forced then to create a new pattern. But instead of being created out of our 5-year-old self, it's now created out of our, however old you are at this point. I mean, I'm 58. So a 58-year-old self, 29. Okay, great. Lots more grist for the mill, lots more information in there that you now know, lots more knowledge, right? Lots more experience that your brain can then call on to create that new pattern. And so, of course, it is going to be more effective at getting you to that goal. It has to be.
Yes. So I'm just curious then for I've through different methods have fixed it, but let's put it bluntly. Most of my childhood, I was overweight. I had really, really crooked teeth that I was made fun of. I was called the monster, and I believed it until about 3 years ago. And then that's when I realized I'm like, oh, it was just, I was on some big, heavy pharmaceutical drugs back then. ADHD back in the 90s, they didn't know what that was back then. They're like, he's crazy, medicate him. But essentially, what I've done is just more very similar to your method is ask the question, why do I believe this? And then that underlying kind of like a whisper or like a wind in the breeze, whatever that voice is, listen to that. And I was just saying, you're not, you just believe this. You've always heard it your whole life kind of thing. So it was just it was interesting when you mentioned that. I'm like, yeah, that's how I fixed it. Cause very politically correct Indian doctor wouldn't say a bad word at all. When I came in, he pretty much looked at me and said, Josh, how long have you been on this shit? And that's when I cleared it. Just that whisper in the wind. pretty much said, get off it now.
Yeah. Do you mean get off the mind pattern, get off the thought, or
the meds at that
the
time.
medications? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you know what? Get off the mind pattern is just equally as good to say, right? Like, how long have you been on this shit? It's great. Yeah, definitely. But here's the thing, Josh, like, you know, when you were little, and thank you for sharing that story, because it's very helpful for your listener, I'm sure. Those mockeries or comments that you heard growing up, they would have formed brain patterns in you, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you ended up believing them, because you had a pattern that believed it. Not because it was true, as you now know. It's because your brain formed a pattern that held that belief. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I always like to say, what if we just had a magic wand and we could just effortlessly just remove those patterns? If you could just wave away that idea that you were called a monster, right? And that you were overweight. Well, if you could just wave that away, you can see now then you would have an opportunity to take a brand new action, because now you're dealing with a blank slate. You've got an empty cup. Whereas before you're trying to fix something that is perceived broken. Make sense?
Right.
So that's why what you did worked so effectively, because you went, oh, hang on a minute. It's not me. It was the situation. It's not me. It was just something that I ended up believing. Brilliant. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just one of those, the thinking fast and slow was definitely one that helped me realize like how I won't say I didn't listen to all your steps, but I'm assuming the first one's that within thinking fast and slow, he says, you've probably seen it in your studies where emotions override logic, but logic can't override emotions. But he said, but there's a caveat, a hole to this. If you breathe 10 times, you can override the emotions too, kind of thing. Is that very similar to what you teach too?
Well, no, let's actually just dive in. It's similar in that we're going to use the body, but let me dive into how I would do it, okay, which is a little different than how Daniel does it. So what is a pattern? Let's just start there.
Right.
A pattern is an intertwined physical sensation, emotion, and thought. We very much in our culture prioritize mind over body, and we say mind wisdom is more important than body wisdom. Not true. As Josh is so brilliantly saying, your emotions are actually the driver's seat, right? The mind is just following along after the emotion and making it appear logical that you take the action that you're taking, but it's not logical at all. So we have mind wisdom and we have body wisdom, and we need both of those. But what is the difference between them? So let's go back to my definition.
Okay.
Physical sensation, emotion, thought. That is what drives an action, a behavior, a belief, not just mind. Okay, really important for everybody to know. So the first step is to identify that pattern. The first step is not to ask yourself, what am I thinking and believing? It's to ask yourself, what is driving that belief, that action, right? And what's driving it is a physical sensation, an emotion, a thought. And you can do it right now. Just imagine being called a monster.
It doesn't feel good.
No, right? Like, ooh, it feels, I don't know, I'm angry, ashamed. I mean, it could go either way, right? Whatever way you're going, that's fine. That's how your pattern is reacting, okay? The next step is to own it as a pattern. So I said I teach a 4-step technique. So let's go into step 2 and explain what I'm about to say. Our brain is locked inside a dark and silent room called a skull. There is no sight in here. There is no sound in here. There is no touch. There is no taste. There is no smell. There's nothing in here other than electrical impulses that fly down these neural pathways. That's important to know, because what the brain is it's an interpreter of the sensory data that's coming in. So the sensory data is flowing in through the senses. We see something, we hear something, in this case, the word monster, right? And our brain now has to interpret that information based on what it's already learned from its past. Yeah? Cool. Okay. With it, that means that if you think, Josh, that you're seeing me, you're actually not. What you're seeing is a pattern in your brain for me. Following?
Interesting.
Okay. Once we know that this brain is in a dark, silent room, we have to start to really question everything that we believe we are seeing as being outside of us. And we have to start to realize, oh, hang on a minute. That is my pattern that has that perspective of what's going on outside. Great. That God gives us back our power. That is ownership. All right. Oh, bless you.
Oh, thank you.
So step 2 is to own it as a pattern and not as it's the situation or it's happening out there, or even as it's me. Like we have patterns for ourselves, for our own identity. So to own it as a pattern is to say, I created that. That's step 2. And step 3, we need to deconstruct it, put it back into just a physical sensation, just an emotion, just a thought. It is the intertwining between the 3 that leads to the action. Okay. So once we tease apart that pattern, and in my book, there's a simple way to do it. It's tricky to explain, but once you get it, it's like, oh yeah, that was easy. That was effortless. So there's an easy way to do it. But once you do it, now that is when your brain is going to do something brilliant. You see, our brain is a pattern maker, and it does not allow you to be without an action. So it's going to snap into a different channel. And the brain has what is called plasticity. It is doing this all the time. We just want to work it systematically rather than just allow it to happen spontaneously, which sometimes happens. Our brain will rewire itself spontaneously, but we want to be in control of that. So that is step 3, is to deconstruct. Then step 4, we get to create a new pattern based on the goal that we set. Make sense?
Yes. At least to me.
Yes. Well, it's actually, it sounds more complicated than it is. It's a 2-minute technique. It's done in the privacy of your own head. And once somebody learns it, they can do it very effectively and very quickly, right? It does take a little bit of time to learn. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to learn it because we're building a pattern for repatterning, if that makes sense.
Right.
But then once you have that pattern, then it's like a tool in your pocket. You're just going to apply it wherever you go, whenever you need to.
So without giving the secret sauce away, what are some more details of steps 2 through 4?
Yeah, so like I said, step 2 is we're going to own it. We're going to own it as a pattern and not as it's happening out there. Okay. And that really does bring the power back to ourselves. I mean, everybody can just imagine this for a moment. Just think about your brain. Just think about your brain, and it's always trying to interpret its information. Okay, so we look at something. Now, neuroscience has determined that as much information that comes in through the senses is actually also occurring inside the brain to translate that information. Okay, so yes, we see partial pictures of what is around us based on what we already know, based on what our patterning already knew. So step 2, I created that. That's really important. Step 3, we need to, how much time do we have, Josh?
I have an hour slotted if you.
Okay. So. Well, then let's dive into the difference between your brain hemispheres, shall we? And that will make more sense out of the 4 steps. So what do you think is happening in the brain hemispheres? Most people know that there is a left brain and a right brain, right? Everybody know that? All right. And it's divided by the center to be the band of tissue. It's called the corpus callosum. That doesn't really matter, but it's divided, and information needs to flow between these 2 brains of ours. Okay. All right. In the left hemisphere, we are used to thinking of the left hemisphere as being mathematical, logical, linear, right? And the right hemisphere is imagination, creativity. The artist is in the right hemisphere. Everybody heard that?
Right.
Okay. Debunk it. Not true. All right. Just cross that off. That is not the difference in the hemispheres as neuroscience now determines it. So Ian McGilchrist, Jill Bolte Taylor, you may have heard of these neuroscientists. They are the ones who are doing deep research into the brain hemispheres and the difference. And that they're coming up with is very exciting. Right here, Josh, sitting here, listening to me, there are 2 things that your brain needs to do at exactly the same time. And these 2 things are mutually incompatible. The first thing your brain needs to do is focus in on what I'm saying. Okay. You need to use information from your past, and you need to extract and not be distracted by everything that's going on in the room. Okay, that is one thing that your brain needs to do. At the same time, though, there's possibility that there might be danger somewhere in the space. Yes. So equally, at exactly the same time, if there's a fire in your kitchen, you better know about it and you better move. So at the same time, you have to have this broad, open, sustained awareness of everything in your environment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just in case there's something going wrong that you better get out of there. Right. All right. Great. These two things you can't do at the same time. Just think about it. How can you focus in and reduce distraction and remain open and be aware of every distraction? It's absolutely impossible.
You have to choose one or the other?
You would think, but nature has a brilliant way of solving this problem. She just severed your brain in two. She said, okay, all right, left brain, you focus in. You be narrowly focused. You listen to Adele. You understand her words. Don't get distracted. While right brain, you stay open to everything in the environment, everything around you. And if you are needing to take a new action rather than listening to me, it is your right brain that is going to inform your left brain, hey, act, get out. There's a fire in the kitchen. You got that? Okay, great. Okay. So what is happening in today's mixed up topsy-turvy world? Why is there so much anxiety in the world today? Why is there so many problems in today's world? Well, it is because we have overeducated the left hemisphere. We've positioned the left hemisphere as being the dominant hemisphere. And we have positioned the right hemisphere as being not that important. Okay. But the right hemisphere is their access to now, to the present moment. The left hemisphere is only accessing its past-based knowledge. So we've prioritized knowing, right? We prioritized intellect. We prioritized all of the things that the left hemisphere does so well. Utilize the environment, utilize us. The left hemisphere as categories, it prioritizes what's good, what's bad. Left hemisphere is excellent at all of that, but it's not very good at being present and now situated. In fact, it sucks at it. Okay. And so that's why there's so much anxiety and so much frustration and misunderstanding in today's world. Conflict, it's because we don't have access to the present moment anymore. We need to rebuild that communication back to our right hemisphere.
So just a side tangent, we can get back to what you were saying. Do you think it's mostly because of cell phones and social media? It's been
going on for thousands of years.
Okay, so it's
definitely are not helping. Yes. But it really has been, Ian McGilchrist in his book, The Master and His Emissary, does an excellent account through history. When it started, at one point in history, the two hemispheres were equally balanced. And at that point in history, there was peace, there was contentment, there was happiness. All of that was occurring. And then the left hemisphere, just through overeducation, just started to become more and more dominant. And today it is extremely dominant, which is why we're facing so many problems.
Okay. And so just curious that
steps. Yeah. Go ahead.
What was that moment in time that he said there was peace? And then we can go back to So
the Renaissance was a time where the two hemispheres were balanced. That was one time in history. And you can see it. There was lots of creative expression back then. People were very much, the Renaissance person you hear, Renaissance man is typically the way they say it. Multiple interests, right? Crossing over broad division of different interests, different skills, different talents. Yeah. So if you read the history of the Renaissance, it's like, yeah, you can see it. You can see why they were much more balanced than we are today. And what were some other times in history? You know what, I've forgotten off the top of my head.
It's all good.
The Romance, yeah. But anyway, what we see is that the imbalance is what's causing all the conflict. And that's exciting because that puts the solution in our own head. If we have to solve all of the problems out there, social, political, economical, oh my gosh, like we're in trouble, right? But if all we have to do is rebuild the connection to our right hemisphere, okay, that's doable. We can do that, especially if we have a tool in our pocket to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So back to the 4 steps. Why did I bring up these 2 hemispheres? Well, the first 2 steps in what I teach are very left hemisphere processes. We divide, we separate, we categorize. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What's my one thought, right? So we're reducing it down. We're focusing in what's going on internally, and we're creating something manageable, something we can hold onto in that moment. But when we get to step 3, where we deconstruct that pattern, we really need to access the right hemisphere, because we want to come to what's actually going on in this moment as we create this brand new pattern. Okay, so that process is why I say it's a little bit tricky. It involves a state of what is called surrendered awareness. It's surrendered observation of what is going on internally in the pattern. So just to add a little bit of meat to the bone on what you're going to do in step 3 is you are going to surrender and observe what is going on internally. And we need the body, not the mind, because the body is our access to now. Okay. And then on the 4th step, that's the trust. And that's where we're going to create those brand new patterns based on that goal that we set. So I probably haven't given you enough to actually do it, guys, but you can get a copy of my book for free, and it's all in there.
I was like, get her book. Like I said, I don't want to give the secret sauce away, but I wanted for me to be like, how did I do it? And it's like, it's very similar to what she recommended. So.
Excellent. Yes. I am so happy to hear that all of these different ways of working our brain are coming into being today, right? Because it's so exciting to see how now I think what's happening, Josh, is that the left brain has reached a point where it can no longer handle today's problems. It is now at the point where it's tapped. Seriously. And everything that it's trying to do now is no longer working. And so that's why I think that techniques such as mine and such as the one you used are coming into existence, because we have to now create something new as we go forward. And so we're in a very, very exciting time. I like to say we're in a revolution of mind. Right? I
do too. I joke with a lot of guests who, when we talk about this, I consider more of a Renaissance time now too.
Yeah. I think we're coming into the next Renaissance time, a time where all of what we did before is going to fall away and something brand new is going to present itself. And the brain and what we now know about the brain is going to be front and center and foremost in everything we do from now on. People are going to start knowing about patterns and taking ownership of their patterns.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like for me, now I'm just curious for you, because you've studied the mind and how it works. ADHD, is it it's not fully like curable, but it is manageable, right?
Well, I like to say that everything is a pattern. So yes, everybody's brain is shaped differently. And, Josh, it's so interesting when we think about the brain. When we think about our bodies and different people's bodies, we all know that they're different. But when we think about the brain, we always tend to have this idea that everybody's brain is exactly the same, right? Well, not true. Your brain is shaped a little differently than my brain. It doesn't make it wrong or incorrect. It's just a different form, right? Just like your body is different than my body. Of course it is. So it's all patterns, I like to say, and it's patterns all the way down. And if your relationship to ADHD, let me express this very clearly. So your brain works, it has a different level of focus. It works a little differently. It has tremendous gifts in there, as you likely now know. Right?
Oh, yes.
And lots of skills that I don't have because I don't have ADHD. So lots of benefits to having it, right? But if your relationship to ADHD is that is bad and wrong, or there's something wrong with me because I have it, that definitely needs to be repatterned so that you can embrace your gifts. And so that your brain's way of operating in the world is seen as for the benefit that it is, rather than as a detriment. Does that make sense? So for everybody who has ADHD, That's how I would suggest you work with it. What's my relationship to that?
Yeah. And like for me, like I realized at a young age, I'm a kinesthetic learner. That's where I keep leaning over because I keep dropping my poker chip. So for me to focus, I need to just do fidget with something. And I actually remember better if I physically do something.
Yeah. Yeah. And luckily in today's world, these differences in how our brains operate are no longer being seen as flaws, because they were when I was growing up, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
if somebody had ADHD, maybe even when you were growing up.
I was in the 90s and I noticed around 2003, at least here in California, they were more open to the idea. But yeah, 90s, they were like, he's weird, medicate him.
Yes, exactly. And now they actually put fidget things on desks in the office, and right? They say, go ahead. Like if you need to fidget.
Just don't tap the pen. That'll piss everyone off.
Exactly.
But yeah, and just for me, like you said, the ADHD, I noticed it's a gift, because that was my air quote monster complex problem. Is I was different. I never thought the same. People are like, how did you know? And I'm like, I don't know, intuition kind of thing. But now I come to realize just how my brain fires. Like you mentioned in a previous show, it's that 1 millisecond ahead of me.
That's right.
I guess how I can process, half the time most people would take to perceive it. So now instead, I just go with it. Like I just texted a friend this morning. I got like that weird, like gut feeling, intuition. I just sent her a text and she's like, how'd you know? I was literally just waking up. I'm like, I contact the spirit world and all that. They told me this.
Yeah. But we joke about that, but it's true. Like Josh, what you just said was so rich, and probably people just missed the richness of what happens in your brain. So I'm going to break it down a little.
All right.
We used to think that thought came first before decision, right? So we used to think that you think first, act second. It was think, feel, act, right? That's how we thought we operated. What neuroscience is now determined based on modern brain scanners. So I should say that about 25 years ago, they created modern brain scanners that really could peek inside the human brain in a non-invasive way. Okay, before that, you had to cut the brain open, or you had to guess what was going on in there. It wasn't very easy to do. So now you can see in there. So what they have now determined is that action, the decision that we're about to make, is being made a fraction of a second before our conscious mind knows we are going to make that decision. So I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment. We think we're the decision maker. We think we're choosing our actions. But the unconscious regions of our brain are lighting up first before we become aware that we want a cookie. Okay? So I like to say, you want to know why your hand's in the cookie jar? It's because your pattern put your hand in the cookie jar, not you, not by choice. Okay, that changes everything, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what Josh's brain does is he operates quickly within those decisions that his brain is making on his behalf. And that's fantastic when you can take those actions that work for you and you don't need to constantly second guess yourself. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So as long as something works, let's use that capacity that the brain does, which is what you've learned how to do. But a lot of people fall into an over-analysis or procrastination because they're constantly second guessing those actions that the brain is already taking. And it's very painful. Right? It creates a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of analysis paralysis.
Oh, I had a huge analysis paralysis problem.
Yeah, because if you've got to always second guess yourself, you're stuck. You can't move forward. And the mind's trying to do what it is ill-designed to do, which is make those decisions on our behalf. It's not its role. Its role is to inform us of the decision that we've already made. That's the mind's job. So its role is just to tell you what it is you are doing rather than tell you what you should be doing.
Right.
Do I need to say that again, or does that make sense?
Say it again.
All right. The mind's job is to inform us what we are doing and not to tell us what we should be doing. And if what we are doing does not work for us, then you need a tool to just remove that action by removing the underlying pattern. There's tremendous peace in that.
There is. There really is.
Tremendous peace. You don't need to worry about anything. Is what I'm doing working for me? No? Okay. I've got a tool in my pocket. I can change it. But don't think that your mind's choosing. It isn't. Your mind's along for the ride, and it rides in on the back of your patterns, I like to say.
It does. Yeah. And it's interesting how you said how my brain makes patterns, and I pick up on quickly. I was just thinking as you're saying that. So it really bugs my coworkers. And it's funny, I walk out and I'll say, I'll be back by 30 seconds before the door opens. And they're like, how? I'm like, I don't know. I can just see from the distance, this normally takes me 30 seconds kind of thing. And then I'm like, it's not one of those I can just draw you a picture and explain it. But then because I figured out that intuition and pattern recognition ability, I've been putting it towards trading. So actually some of my coworkers are like, hey, so we know it's not trading advice, but where do you see the market going? And I just look at my little indicators and I'm like, it's going to go up today. And they're like, and they all like, okay. And then they click it and they buy, and then they text me, all right, when am I supposed to get on? I'm like, I don't know that one, man. I'm not the Wizard of Oz.
But you know what? But that access to our right hemisphere, and probably, Josh, just simply because we're so cut off from it in our culture, but you have it very clearly. It does feel magical. It does feel like it's coming from another realm or from some spiritual divine entity, right?
It does at times.
Yeah, definitely it does. And it's just because the right hemisphere is silent. And when we access it, it's where the wisdom lies. It is definitely where we know stuff that we don't know that we know, right? It's because it's something that we're gaining access to now rather than something that we learned in the past, if that makes sense. The left hemisphere is about the past, right?
Left is past, right? Okay, present. I'm just curious for you. Mm-hmm. I'm just like an armchair expert. Is there a way that like my brain can't actually process pictures? Like if you say an apple, I more see like a basic silhouette of the Apple logo. I don't see the red apple with the shine and the green leaf. Is that normal?
Every brain is different, and there is no normal. So that's really important. It's like everybody is different and there's no normal, right? The left brain likes to have an idea of perfection. Here's how the left brain operates. It likes this idea of perfection, and everybody needs to be compared to that. That's how the left brain always works.
Okay.
Do I see an apple? Like if you said to me, Adele, picture an apple. No, I don't have that visual ability to picture in my mind an apple. I can describe it brilliantly because I think more in words than in visual, right? But in your case, you're visualizing, but you're visualizing something that's a logo and not the actual apple. Hey, here's my thing. Does it work? Yes, we both know what we're talking about. So great. We're going to keep those patterns. We don't need to change them. If it didn't, though, and you were picturing a banana, then I would say, you know what, Josh, you might want to repattern that because we're not talking about the same thing.
A banana and an apple are clearly different. That's just, it's one of those, as I've talked to people, I'm just one of those weird things because like I'm better at explaining it, even though I can't see it, because it makes more sense to explain in detail what I see. And that's where a lot of people are of like, man, Josh, like, you must have a gorgeous picture. I'm like, nah, it looks like a little 5-year-old stick figure. And then that's about it. It's just a 2D picture is all I see. And they're like, really? How I perceive things.
Yes. Yeah. So your words are very descriptive then, and you're allowing them to see it clearly in their mind, which is brilliant.
And it's just one of those, one of my coworkers, she's very young. And so I was, again, kinesthetic, I have to do something. So talking helps me. I'm doing something, but I'm working. So he at first thought I was like crazy or having a mental breakdown. I'm like, nope, sorry. I was trying to work out something in my head. I need to talk to an expert, which is myself. And he's like, all right. But I was just telling him, he's like, what were you talking about then? I just tell me. And so I told him this basic scene I've been seeing in my head for a long time and described it. And it's one of those, he was like dumbfounded and actually like sitting on the floor, like, wow, dude, I felt like I was actually there. I'm like, again, I was just trying to explain to myself so it would go away.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that, speaking to the expert in your own head, because everybody has an expert in their own head. It's called your right hemisphere. When you can speak to it, it'll inform you of some very remarkable things that you may not have known that you know. So
yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm just curious, you said this way early on, our brain is in our skull, what we see is not real. Is this I'm not going with like the whole metaverse or matrix, but is it like what we perceive, like that's why we can't bite our fingers off because we know a certain electrons when to stop? Or is it more of like the deeper, this literally may just be a facade in front of us?
Well, I mean, I love The Matrix. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
What can we know about the outside world? Well, I'm not saying that the outside world doesn't exist. All right. That would be what philosophers would call solipsism. Some of you may know that term. It means that everything is occurring inside everybody's own head, and we are like in the Matrix. Instead, it's more like the interpretation that our brain makes is partial. It's partial based on what it already knows.
Okay.
So, and what I know is different from what you know. So you and I, Josh, let's say that we're both standing in the exact same room. Are we standing in the same room? Well, we could on one level say yes, but on another level, no, because what I'm going to notice and what my brain is going to pay attention to is different from what your brain is going to notice and pay attention to. Okay. Why? What is that difference? What is the brain prioritizing? Well, whatever is familiar to you. So if something is learned from your past, your brain is going to gravitate first and foremost towards that and not towards the other stuff that is not that familiar. My brain is going to gravitate towards what's familiar to it and away from other stuff. So all of us have a partial perspective of the room that we're in, right? Is that making sense?
Right.
Okay. So, the idea with repatterning is to remove that familiarity. So we are standing in a blank slate room and having our brain having to recreate that room again for us. Okay. And bring us a larger perspective.
I'm just curious, could that be a literal white room? Like
sure,
in your,
it can be a literal room. Absolutely. I mean, when people repattern, my experience of repatterning is I will open my eyes after I've applied the 2-minute technique in my head, and everything will look brand new to me for a fraction of a second. It just shows up, wow, like this is beautiful. This is so different. This is so that I didn't know it was even here. Okay. So it's subtle, it's slight, but yes, when we are creating brand new patterns, there's a lightness to life, and there is a delight to life that is often overlooked inside a left brain pattern that is constantly overriding the past situation with the present. Can I give an example of that? Because that might help. Okay. Yeah. So, and there's a brilliant example of this by Marsha Martin. Marsha Martin is, she's a leadership coach. She's trained some of the top leaders like Tony Robbins and things like that. And she has one example in one of her books. And she says, imagine that you're 3 years old and you're skipping down the street and this big black dog jumps in front of you, scares you, you run back to your parents who are walking behind you. You think everything is forgotten, okay? Meanwhile, your brain has stored a pattern for big black scary dog, and it's in your brain. And then imagine that I'm going to use me, so I imagine you're a girl, right? And you have this crush on this boy in your class. You're 16 years old. You're just like, you've just been all year hoping that he'll ask you out on a date. And finally he does. And you meet him at the movie theater. and you're sitting together and you're sharing a box of popcorn, and your heart's skipping a beat each time your hand brushes up against his. And then it happens. He leans over to give you a kiss. And the fur collar on his jean jacket brushes up against your cheek. And this girl leaps out of her seat, storms out of the movie theater. Who do you think you are? I'm not that kind of girl, and walks out. Okay, what happened? Well, it had nothing to do with the kiss. What happened inside the human brain is that past created pattern for black fur overrode that particular situation that she's in with an image of fear. So when you're 16 and on a date, when you're 3 years old and you're skipping down the street and a dog barks in front of you, you need to run back to your parents. But when you're 16, that is the last thing you should be doing. But the brain is going to take that action because the brain isn't working on logic. It's working on the fastest speed, the fastest action that it knows it can take in any given situation. And most of the time, the situation that our brain thinks we are in is not the situation we're actually in. It's the situation we were in the past when the pattern got created. That makes sense?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy, he studies history and all that. And he was saying how we as a society have become air quote insane, which is your left brain analogy. But I told him, I said, well, the one biggest problem we have as a species, we're moving too quick for our bodies to our minds and bodies to catch up. And I told him, I said, some of these fears we have, I said, like back in the days of African savanna, there weren't that many green trees. So we're going to say the Amazon forest where there's like bushes and trees and there's cougars and jaguars in the trees. If you noticed a bush move, 9 times out of 10, your brain's like, that's a scary monster. Probably should just throw something at it and make it go away. So now we don't have that. So I said, at least here in California, there's no random moose trying to gore me kind of thing.
That's right.
So I said, the hunter instinct that we used to have, well, now I'm like, sadly, we've retargeted it to ourselves, which is why certain demographics get really, really like targeted because it's like, oh, you're different. Therefore, my primitive brain that I had like 100,000 years ago says different, must kill it kind of thing. But we can't kill anymore. Then it adds a whole new layer.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Now, luckily for us as human beings, our brain is highly, highly adaptable.
Right.
Okay. Highly adaptable. And we can repattern anything that didn't work for us in the past. So we believe we are locked into a primitive brain, but we're actually not. We can change it. We can reprogram it. And the more people who do that, the more opportunity we have of creating that 100 monkey syndrome. Have you heard of that, Josh?
Yes, I have.
Okay, wonderful. The 100 monkey syndrome is when so many people on the planet reach a level of change, it will ripple out and change everything. Now, that makes total sense inside of patterns because we all communicate through language. When enough of us have changed our mindset, changed our language, changed our way of perceiving the world, boom, that language will just spread and everybody will at the same time be upgraded, which is amazing. Okay, so we have a massive opportunity here and things are not lost. It is not hopeless. We just have to work on our own brain, our own patterns, and boom, we are doing a massive service for the rest of the planet.
Wonderful. Before we get too late into this, how long do you have anyone after me at 3?
I don't. I have to be off about 3:15. So if you want to stay on then, that's great.
That's wonderful. Actually, I want to say so we can keep both of us on track because I feel like we can go at least another hour or two.
I'm sure you'll have to have me back.
Definitely.
To part 2. Yeah.
To part 2. So I got 3 questions for you.
Okay.
First one, other than work, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during these COVID lockdown times?
Oh, my son built an aquaponics greenhouse.
Nice.
Spending a lot of time helping him. He's both him and my daughter, they're doing it together. They are re-looking at the future of farming and they are transforming the future of farming. Yes, I saw your little aquaponics thing there. I was so excited to see that. Absolutely. Yeah. So he's got a massive one, Josh. You should see it. It's like 250 feet.
Nice.
Yeah, it's huge. So I've been spending a lot of time helping there. What else have I been doing? I've been writing a lot of content. So I'm writing a lot of, when COVID hit, I had to change all of my business from being live events to being on an online space. So I've been doing that a lot. So
That's good. I would say, and it's one of those, there's going to at least be half the demographic that wants to be in person, half they're going to be online. If you could figure out a way to incorporate both, that'd be a heavy hitting good.
Yeah. It's funny because lately my mind has been kicking up all these ideas again for being in the space, like being in an event space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great, like stuff you can't do online. So there's benefits to online, and then there's benefits of being together, as you know.
Oh yeah, I want to say it's with the young kid. I would always tell him, I said, there's, whether you realize it or not, how we can perceive information. I said, that everyone says, oh, the vibe is bad. I said, that's a thing, but that's like the sixth sense. We just don't know how to quantify it, kind of thing. And you get that feeling if you're like, oh, you walk into a fun place, you're like, this is fun, I'm going to be here, kind of thing. So you can't do that online. You could try, so true, but you can't.
Yeah, you really can't, can you? It's just a different feel. It's more intimate than online, I find. Like it's much more personal, and you can really do some intimate stuff online. But yeah, you're totally right, Josh. I agree.
Because I'm like, I told him the best way to explain it is Disney's figured out is when you go to Disneyland, whether you're a grumpy old man or not, you somehow are really happy.
It's true.
So the second one is someone aspiring to be like you, a successful woman, wrote your own book, all that. What are some tips, tricks, or advice you give them to start down that path?
Believe in yourself. Your brain is brilliant. The only reason that we are positioned as small and incapable and not good enough, hey, listen, every person on this planet has a voice that says, I'm not good enough. Don't believe it. Okay. The only reason that you have that voice is because you are running on past created patterns. As soon as you change those, that voice melts away. You just will no longer know yourself like that. Okay. So believe in yourself. Really take on that you're so much more than what you've been taught. And I had to learn that lesson a hard way. I mean, honestly, Josh, it wasn't until I was like 47, 48 years old that I started to question the operating instructions that I've been given, that I started to question, wait a minute, this can't be me. There's got to be something else going on in my brain that just doesn't fit what I'm being told to do. Okay. Don't wait that long, guys. I mean, if you're listening to Josh, if you're Josh's age, start now. Don't wait till you're my age to realize how brilliant and how absolutely perfect your brain is.
Oh yeah. It's each one's unique special gift. As long as you know how it works. Yeah. It's great things can happen.
And you can work it. Exactly.
Oh yes. Got to get her book. So where can everyone get your book?
Oh, you can get a free copy. Just go to shift4steps.com. That is the number 4. And you can get a copy there. I'll send you a personally autographed copy. And you can also go, like, if some people aren't readers, that's fine. Like if you're not somebody who likes to read books, you can get 30-day access to all of my training to try it out. And you can get that at my name, adelespraggon.com.
Nice. I will definitely be linking those in the description for everyone. So, and then I remember you saying it's just shipping if you wanted the signed copy, right?
Yes, I should say yes. The book is free. All that I ask is people pay for shipping, and I will send you a free copy.
Perfect. Absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Josh. It's been an honor to be here.
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You are an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.